Hi, I'm Mike Minekki, and I'm going to be talking to you about how organizations and how Yale might use machine learning to create content faster and smarter. This started out as an internal presentation, and it was a little bit more low-key, but on Franz's advice, stealing from Mike Connolly from his presentation yesterday. AI is set to transform industries, and including communications. It is expected to be a 1.4 to 2.6 trillion dollar transformation for just the marketing communications industry in the next few years. It's one of those technologies that seems like it's in the future, or something that's going to be coming down the pipe, or something that's frankly in science fiction. But really, it's something that organizations are using today in their communication plans, and there's a lot of opportunities right away. So I'm Mike Minekki. I'm the director of technology at 4Kitchens. And 4Kitchens, we're a digital agency that creates websites, apps, and software for organizations that need to tell important stories. We've been around for 13 years and have served a sophisticated clientele, including Yale, as their trusted digital partner to realize and exceed their goals. The 4Kitchens web chefs believe that creating a website is like preparing a feast. It requires a team of people with specialized and complementary skills working in concert to create something with that lots of people will enjoy. It's part art, part science, and it's all about preparation. So what I'm going to try to dive into today is defining a few terms around machine learning and artificial intelligence, talking a little bit about how news organizations are doing things that you would only expect to see in science fiction today, diving into some of the ways that it can be utilized here at Yale or on any CMS, and then really, hopefully, get people thinking about how it might be used in the future. So what I'm not going to talk about is I'm going to stick only to the editorial process and how it really affects editors, but three key areas where it really, where there are huge opportunities and where it's being utilized today are in personalization. That's probably the one thing that people first think of when they think of how AI and content kind of go together. The other one is in analytics, and in chatbots. Each one of those could be its own presentation, so that's really the reason I'm leaving it out today. And then also, kind of everybody who works at the CMS knows that it doesn't get nearly as much love as some of those other things. So just to kind of define some terms, machine learning. So from Wikipedia, it's a category of algorithm that allows software applications to become more accurate in predicting outcomes without being explicitly programmed. It's really kind of bringing statistics into the things that you traditionally think computer programming is doing. And it opens up some interesting opportunities because of that. Artificial intelligence, is kind of the blanket term, but they get used interchangeably, and depending on kind of who's speaking and who the audience is. Honestly, like lots of technical people will use machine learning, and marketing people are going to use AI because it sounds cooler. And then a really big part of this, and a lot of the opportunities that are coming from content come from natural language processing. So that's artificial intelligence that helps computers understand, interpret, and manipulate human language. And dive into more about how it does that as we go. One way that helped me understand kind of the difference between machine learning and kind of like what we traditionally think of programming is to kind of compare the two. So in programming, when you're in computer programming, you have data. So you have like data coming from a database or something else, or input by a user. And you have rules, so like those are the functions that you write as a programmer, like if-then statements, all that. And then you combine those together, and you get out predictable output. Because it's written by humans, it's mostly predictable output. But there are ways to write tests to make it better. And the rules are written by humans. So like when you're programming a computer, like there's like you can kind of trace back in and step through it and understand exactly what it's doing. In contrast, machine learning is data, so whatever data you're putting into the system, and then statistical models that output results with confidence scores. And it's a lot different than than programming, which is really deterministic. But in AI and the outputs of AI, you'll get a result that is 50% one and 50% another, or 90% one, 10% of another. And the models, the statistical models, they're built from examples, and there's a black box element to it. So you're not actually like manipulating the outputs directly, and you really can't step through them and easily understand the logic that is going into it, which is kind of a fundamental difference between them. It's what opens up a lot of the opportunities that AI opens up, but it also creates its own set of problems. So what is it good at? It's good at finding and following patterns and then making predictions based on those patterns. And those predictions and those patterns, they can be in things that are really squishy, like what's inside of an image. It can also be really, or like what somebody's trying to say when they're using words to communicate. And making predictions, so like based on the huge amount of data that you put in, if you put this one piece of data into it, you expect it to come out this way. It gets better over time as models are refined, and we're all kind of experiencing this as it goes, particularly with like big companies like Google, as it's getting better at reading our email and understanding like what we're trying to say when we're talking to our Google Home, things like that. And really, the biggest fundamental difference and biggest fundamental opportunity that machine learning and AI provides is that it's the first time that computers and content management systems can really see into the complex stuff that is images or like human-to-human communication. Before that was like a content management system is just like it's a place where you'd put stuff, but it really has no idea what's in there, and it kind of doesn't care. And this is the first time where your content management system can start to actually read what you write. Okay. So like there's some risks, or there are things that are not good at. The building of models takes time and iteration. So it's not, it's because it's not deterministic. It takes like creating models, testing them out, seeing what the outputs are like, and experimentation. It can very easily amplify bias, and I'm sure everybody here has heard stories about how facial recognition doesn't work with people of color and things like that. And that's a very real concern. And the other one is that it really, to really get good, it requires very vast data sets and constant cultivation. And for most small organizations, like those are kind of the stumbling blocks, and where AI and machine learning don't become viable solutions. But there's lots of ways to sort of tap into the work that companies like Google and Microsoft are doing in this space to get access to those really big data sets and sort of the outputs of them. Cassie goes, man, I think Polish, I think I'd be good at pronouncing that, but I can't, so I'm going to give up. It puts it this way, like, are you in the business of baking bread or making ovens, right? And in this case, like the ovens are being made by Google and by Microsoft, and you're kind of putting stuff into it and putting dough into it and getting bread back. That's a good way to look at it. So as I said before, content management systems today don't know and really don't care what you put in them. They might have some rules around the number of characters that a piece of content has, but if it's a story about birds or if it's a story about what happened last week at a sports game, it really doesn't know unless you tell it, unless you tag it, right? What changes with AI and machine learning is for the first time, like the content management system can really read and see what's in your content. And that seems kind of futuristic, but we're like literally living with this stuff in our daily lives, more so probably than we are living with this stuff in our CMSs. Major publishers are already writing content that's being published on their publications, in their print publications even, that is 100% created by machines. The Washington Post has a bot called Heliograph, and what it does is it writes summaries of Little League games across the country. And that's a beat that nobody could really keep up with, and they wouldn't be able to support otherwise. But with AI, they are able to take the data from the events, meaning like who won, who lost, how many people were on base, et cetera, and write a story about that based on a template. Forbes has Bertie, which is a new content management system, and what it does is it uses machine learning and AI to suggest better headlines and find images that are relevant to the content that's being written, so it eliminates some of the menial tasks. And then Bloomberg, kind of famously, has what they call, kind of ominously, Cyborg, which takes financial statements from companies and creates news articles based on those. So these are things that are happening right now. Like these are articles that you're reading today. The last project that I want to mention is it's called Radar from the BBC. And what it does is it creates localized content to make it more relevant and more poignant for people in different parts of England. So if it's a story about homelessness, when it gets to the part about statistics, and you're in Bristol, it'll talk about the homelessness problem in Bristol. And if you're in London, it'll talk about the homelessness problem. It'll use the statistics from London to make that story more relevant to you as the user, which I thought was one of the most fascinating sort of applications of this. Another place that this is just showing up that is kind of surprisingly effective is in Google Photos. If you type into the search bar almost any word in Google Photos, you will get back your photos that have been tagged by Google for that word. So here I look for pink, if you look for dogs, if you look for girls, if you look for China or Japan, all those things come up. Without any tagging on my part or any interaction, and if you use Google Photos, you might have noticed that there is an aspect of it these days where it kind of puts together stories for you based on images that kind of go together. And so it's kind of helping you create content without you having to actually sit there and organize and go through all the photos and figure out like which ones are the good ones or which ones go together. It's also able to help you write. Is anybody here besides me use Grammarly? Yeah, a few, yeah. And it works. It works well. It has relevant suggestions. It reads content that you put into it, kind of integrates with your Gmail and with your editor and things like that. And this is a similar kind of lower cost thing called Hemingway. And it's not just sort of it's not just low-hanging fruit. It's looking for sentences that are too long. It's also looking for words that are less effective and elevating your writing and not just excuse me, locking it into a set of rules. Google's also working on API moderation tools with the New York Times to help cut down the amount of toxicity in the comments that are made on articles. So with this API, they're creating tools that automatically give feedback to writers and also provide ways for moderators to more quickly engage with the content. So that's kind of like that's AI in the broader world and what's happening kind of outside of our little ecosystem. There are a number of Drupal modules that do some nascent things, but like nothing nearly as interesting, honestly, as some of the things we talked about here. One of them that's a really low-hanging fruit and probably a frustration that everybody in this room has had is creating automatic alternative text. There's also a very nascent Google Cloud Vision integration that pulls in the tagging capabilities and will actually tag your images that you upload to Drupal with all the same tags that I was talking about in Google Photos. So if you upload a picture of a girl or a picture that has the color pink in it in your CMS, those will also be tagged so you can more easily find them and attach them to content. There's also a set of tools called intelligent content tools, and they require installing Python and some flasks and stuff like that, but once you get it running, it'll actually do automatic summaries for you, which is pretty fascinating and pretty interesting. I haven't played around with it directly, but it does look like it does what it says on the box. And this is just the start. So in a way, I think it's not that AI isn't being used for content creation. It's that these tools kind of aren't filtering down into the layer that we live in, right? So next, I want to jump into a little bit of like what these APIs are like and what can be leveraged and where we can kind of go immediately in the near future. Because this is something that we've been thinking about, we created a demo called happygram.ai, and you can actually try it out later today. And what it does is it collects a happy moment from you, and then illustrates it using images from Unsplash using some of the APIs that I'm talking about. It's a kind of a fun way to kind of see what is potentially possible, but also showcases how you can use these technologies to make content creation more streamlined. So I'm going to be talking about the tools that Google provides, but all the cloud providers, including AWS and Microsoft Azure and Google and IBM Watson, all have these capabilities, and they're very comparable between them. There's kind of subtle differences in the capabilities, subtle differences in what they do and pricing, but it's really interchangeable, and depending on which platform you're on, they're probably available. So the first one is the Google Natural Language Processing tools, and what they do is that they give you a lot of analysis of text that you put into it. So they analyze sentiment, so telling you how positive or negative a piece of content is. So that would be useful for things like moderation of comments, also in trying to understand customer interactions with you, but also can be a tool for writers if they're to be able to kind of provide them with feedback about the content that they're writing, right? If they think that they're writing something happy, but Google comes back and says it's not really that happy, it could be a sign that there's a different way to word things. It provides a very in-depth analysis of the parts of speech and what content is about, but then also how the different words are linked together, and you have a very detailed set of tools to be able to kind of pull out phrases and associations of words in it. There's a very global content classification that happens, and you can see, like in Google, there's like links to the Wikipedia articles and etc. And also, it provides the most salient topics in a piece of text. And seeing this in action is pretty impressive because it's not, like we're kind of used to that with keywords, like with a search or something like that, but this is different. So this is what the content is really about, and it's prioritized based on how important the nouns or the subjects or the entities, as it calls it, are in the parts of speech. The next API that's probably the most useful out of these and the lowest hanging fruit that's kind of immediately available and also really easy because there's already a Drupal integration, it's an API that classifies the contents of image, it extracts objects from the images, and I'll just move to the slide because it's puppies anyway. And it does a surprisingly good job of this. So, so the things that like impress me, like when I tried this out, is not that it finds a dog, but that it tags all 3 of the dogs that are in this. So 2 of the dogs, you can't see their faces; they're looking away, and the back one, like it's it's almost questionable whether it's a cat or not, right? The other thing that it finds is that these are Labrador retrievers, which is actually questionable in some ways, but is surprisingly accurate. And then finally, that it identifies that they're in a kennel. And to me, that's kind of interesting because you can't really tell the shape of a kennel or something like that. It's just, I guess, dogs with vertical bars in front of it get, have a very high probability of being in a kennel. So, I mean, that's, in digging into these things, and you can try them out on their website, it is surprisingly powerful and surprisingly accurate. The last tool is probably the most powerful and the one that can provide the biggest advantages to content creators. And it's called AutoML. And what it is a tool that takes all the complexity out of building your own machine learning models and gets it out of your way. It works by you tagging your content, a portion of it, as the learning model that it's going to use, and then uploading all of your content and then just running the algorithm through it. You can see when, if you try the demo out later today, we use it to categorize happy moments, and there's about 7 categories, and it's right almost every single time, which is like it's fascinating, and that can be used to take content that your editors are putting in and tag it with your taxonomy. It can also be used to tag it with a taxonomy that, or a range of taxonomies that would be completely pedantic and a huge burden on your users. So I don't know if anybody here has like a complicated taxonomy and that there's like fights around, well, does it really belong in this or does it belong in that? And like one person is tagging things one way, but then another person is tagging things another way, and it creates a mess and makes the content difficult to find. Using this tool, that can all be automated, and editors can just go back to just writing and not having to worry about all of that types of content. The other thing that it can really help with is with SEO. So being able to take content and then and automatically attach all the metadata that Google or Facebook is looking for, and take that out of the writer's way. So those are some of the different ways that those are some of the things that are available. But broadly, what can it do? So it can automate menial tasks. So taking things like classification, writing metadata, attaching alt text out of the writers or the content creators day to day. Even starting to do things like summarize text. It can also combine data with templates in a much smarter way than you can now. So right now you can sort of say that like, okay, well this is gonna be content, this is gonna be an image, and you kind of like, you put it into places and it all fits together. But instead, now that can go a layer deeper and do something like the BBC, where instead of talking about, you can localize the content and talk about statistics that are relevant to the users, or write one article, use it in different schools across across campus, and replace the relevant information intelligently. It can also provide very deep analysis of the content and very unbiased analysis of the content. So tools like Hemingway and Grammarly can provide feedback to writers about how their writing is, how effective it is, and how it's working. But it can also provide an entry point to all the media that's being used across campus, and centralize it and tag it in ways that make it useful to other parts of the campus. So like when that like going back to the picture of the puppies inside the kennel, probably very likely that if you have a very disciplined content creation team, that like if they were uploading that image, that they would tag it as dogs, maybe tag it as puppies. But it's unlikely that, and where they took it and things like that, probably, but it's unlikely that they would actually tag that image with the fact that they're in a kennel. That's kind of like a weird detail that Google picks up on, but as you're like, if it wasn't an article about kennels, that would probably never come up in the mind of the content creator, right? But here, it's just very pedantically and very very deeply sort of looking at what's there, comparing it to the things it's seen before, and telling you what it thinks is there. Another way that this can be leveraged is to provide suggestions to improve content and take the analytics data that's coming in and provide suggestions as to what kinds of headlines or how headlines can be reworded so that they're more effective when the content goes out. And then finally, a deep categorization and a very unbiased categorization of content. So these are all the things that like are possible or can be done with machine learning and AI. But there's one very big caveat, and that when creating models or putting information into a machine learning model, it is imperative that you really look at very deeply into what you're putting into it, because it's a black box. It really it doesn't lend itself to easy scrutiny, and it's very easy to create not just one piece of content or one piece of or one image that's biased or that doesn't speak to everyone, but really kind of create that problem across campus. And with when you're doing things like making suggestions to improve content or suggesting images, that can really reinforce the biases that are made by the people who are creating those models, right? And it'll happen in subtle ways, and it'll also happen on a much grander scale than just one person writing one article. And that's why ethics and AI really kind of go together as a conversation. It comes up in the news this way, but it's not a FUD, and it's not an exaggeration. Like this is like it literally is a tool to automate and disseminate bias. Google and all the other and Amazon both have extensive portions about their ethics and how they're approaching it. And it's going to worth, if you're kind of diving into this stuff, to really kind of take a look at how they're approaching this and the mistakes that they've already made. That's it.